What do you know about it?
Okay, so Tiger 21, Google it. I don't know the URL. Maybe it's just that .com. But basically, it's a peer group where you have to have at least $10 million of investable assets in order to join. It's very expensive. It's $30,000 a year. I wouldn't call it a mastermind because mastermind has a certain connotation, but yeah, it kind of is that. I logged onto the site. I'm not a member, but I used a friend's login to check it out. And there's at least 850 members according to what I saw and according to their site. So what's that math? $24 million a year in revenue. They have local chapters that meet up, I guess now digitally, and they do things like they share one another's portfolio and you have to defend your portfolio. And so it's basically rooted in rich people talking about rich people stuff, mainly being investing, but I think it turns into a little bit of therapy every once in a while, like a lot of groups do. But What did your buddy say?
All right. So I texted our mutual friend, Keith, and he's a real estate guy. He's been on the pod. You can go listen to Keith's episode. And Keith's a good dude. And he goes, I go, you're in Tiger 21, right? And he goes, yes. What's up? And I basically asked him, what do you think about it? He's like, it's an interesting group. It's because it's all about investing, preserving wealth. It's mainly for older people. And he goes, the typical meeting goes 4 hours. You do, like you said, a portfolio defense where you talk about what you're holding and why, and other people get interested in it. And sometimes there's speakers. Sometimes it's an external speaker. Sometimes it's somebody from the group who speaks, and there's like a moderator. And they also do like events, because if you go to the website, you can see like they hosted a Tiger 21 event at Magic Johnson's house. And so they're definitely trying to build this kind of like who's who network, this sort of like Soho House vibe to the whole thing.
And so they do that. They also, you get like deals. So a friend of mine sent me a deal where they basically, when you're wealthy, you get this thing called umbrella insurance, which you pay $2,000 a year. And it's just like general insurance. And it's basically the story they tell you is like, if you get in a car crash and someone Googles you, they're going to see you're rich and they're going to want to sue you for $5 million. And this protects against all types of stuff. And so they give you a discount on umbrella insurance. And so by my calculation, I actually would bet that they do 30 to 40 million in revenue. And they recently sold to private equity. And so it's a relatively big business. And I actually read up on it. And someone said like there's 90% retention rate, which is pretty amazing. I've also been following Reddit's Fat Fire, which is a subreddit similar to this. And it's like tripled over the last year. So this space has got me incredibly interested. But this is just one example of a paid community. And so what I wanted to do was go through a few other paid communities that are interesting. I'm going to try to explain why I think they work and then where the opportunity is for other paid communities. Does that sound good?
Can I start with one opportunity, which is why isn't this just the business model for our podcast? Like, why aren't we starting Tiger 21 for people that are, that have, let's call it $1 million of investable assets. So $1 million of sort of like liquid net worth that you can go invest into something. And why aren't we starting this now? This seems like the perfect thing to do for a podcast like this.
I think that probably there should be something like this. I agree. If you go to the Tiger 21 website, you'll see like, the type of models people use on their website is like their ideal customer. And it's like 65-year-old white dudes who own insurance companies that are quite wealthy, but not young or not like our kind of crew. Yeah. So I agree. I think there's something there.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go into it.
All right. So let's talk about where should we start? I've done a bunch of research. How about we talk about?
By the way, sorry, interrupt you one more time. The thing I just said, by the way, I think is important. I said, why isn't that the business model for this podcast? I think way too many podcasts try to just do ads, and we've talked in the past about like Supercast, which lets you do like a paid kind of super premium version of it for your hardcore fans who pay you $9 a month or $5 a month or whatever. And, I started a rolling fund largely off of the audience from this thing that said, hey, I've listened to this guy a bunch. I trust him. He has a good track record. And so now that rolling fund is $4 million a year that I get to invest into startups. That's more value than all of the ad revenue that we had before. And so I think that more people should figure out business models that are different from the content that they're creating. And so I'm surprised more podcasts don't have different business models.
I agree with you, but we are
It is more work.
we're in one of the most lucrative niches there is. I mean, like if you're a comedian, if you're what's that shit called? The two women who talk about sex all the time.
Call her daddy.
Yes. Like that's a little bit different. So how do you make money off that? That's a little bit different. And that's actually what we're going to talk about with paid communities. So let's actually talk about, and I'm going to bring that up. So let's talk about what makes them interesting and what makes them not interesting. So to me, what makes them interesting is that they can grow pretty quickly. So you had a podcast, you do this $4 million fund. Now building the audience takes a while, but you turned your fund on and it was $4 million in a matter of months, very quickly. So they seem relatively fast to grow. They're really fast if you have an audience, but compared to like a software company, which could take 10 years, I think you definitely could build it in a matter of 2 or 3 years. Second, they seem pretty fun to run if the interest of your community is the same interest that you have. If they don't, then it's definitely not as fun, but it's kind of interesting it's very interesting if that's what you care about. Third, you don't really need a lot of money to start one. You kind of actually need no money. You really could just start with a paid Facebook group. And you could have a really lean team to do it. And finally, they definitely seem pretty profitable because you can have a lean team. But let's talk about the cons. One, and this is what I've learned with our paid stuff and from friends, I think churn could be pretty high. Did you notice that churn was high in any paid communities you've been part of?
Honestly, the churn was not high in the paid community that I ran.
But
and I don't measure
the year.
Yeah, for sure. But it was a monthly fee. So you could churn out monthly, right? For trends, I think you charge annually. So you don't know your churn until, sort of later, unless somebody actively cancels.
So it's not like enterprise software churn where it's like a net, like a 100
net negative.
Yeah. So that I don't think that exists in most communities.
By the way, my paid community, just for real numbers, mine was 7% a month was churning, which is like if you're not adding any new members, that doesn't take long for it to go to zero. But I
think 7% is 1 year.
No, I'm talking about monthly. I was churning 7%, and so you're saying 1 year for it to go to zero? Yes, exactly.
I think if you have a 4% churn, that's 18 months.
And so with including my growth, I think my net churn was like 1%. So I think I was adding 6% and I was losing 7% basically every month. And can you share anything about trends? What was the retention like?
Yeah, so we had some payment issues when we first launched. So basically we had some issues where if someone signs up on day 1 and on day 366, they get a renewal, the credit card statements, a lot of the banks will be like, whoa, what's this? That's fraud. So we actually had a big fraud, a problem with banks blocking it, but 80% of people were opted in to renew in year 1 or renew in year 2 in our first cohort.
Yeah.
Ballpark, about 80%, which is pretty good, but it's hard to get new customers on a consistent basis.
Yep.
Okay, so the second thing is a lot of times they don't scale that well. And the reason they don't scale that well is if your community is kind of like Trends, where you value close-knit connections, or Tiger 21, more people makes it actually worse. Now, if your community is content-based, which we're going to talk about in a second, it can actually make it way better. But a lot of communities, like a YPO, like if there's 150 people at your meeting versus 5 people at your meeting, one is worse than the other.
Right, because the scale gets worse for 2 reasons. One is exclusivity. So if the reason to be in this group was that it's exclusive, the more people in, the less exclusive it is. Or if the value is that, oh, I really like this conversation. This conversation was really, really nice, but now you get a noisy room of 1,000 people. Well, now it's just too noisy. I can't keep up with this. I don't know who these people are. Some of these people are saying stupid things. I'm out of here, right? So that's the 2 reasons that the scalability hurts.
Yes, and it can work though, because if you're a Reddit, which is a community, not a paid community, but it's a good community, you want more. You need more. You need way more people. If you are Quora, you need way more people. If you're some of the other examples that you need way more people is good, and that's great. But it's not always good to add more people. So what I want to talk about is a few communities that I found that I think are interesting, and then I want to talk about opportunities in the space. And then finally, we can talk about what I think you need to build a successful community. So the first one that I discovered, and I've actually brought up here a ton, is called Aventa. Have you seen Aventa?
No.
Okay, so Aventa, I know the first example doesn't even entirely apply because I think Aventa is actually a free community, but you need to apply or get invited, so it's somewhat similar. But Aventa is a professional group. I believe it has 18,000 participating members, and it's for executives. Particularly, are you on the website right now?
No, I'm on our notes.
Okay. Basically, it's for Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 people. It's people like I don't even because I've never worked at a company. I don't even understand all these roles. But like a CIO, what's that? A chief information officer. So I said CSO. I'm looking at their website. CISO. I don't know what CISO means. It was that chief information security officer.
Yeah, CISO. Yeah.
So these are like things that I don't even. Oh, I guess they have CFO. I know what that is, chief financial officer. So it's basically executive.
It's just turned into a glossary section for Sam to figure out what the different role.
CHRO is?
Yeah, that's basically your HR, the chief HR officer, basically.
Okay, I guess that one was easy. How about a CDO?
I don't know that one.
Chief Data Management Officer. Because come on, a lot of people aren't going to know what this stuff is, but it's a big thing. They have 18,000 members, and check this out. They sold in 2016 for close to $300 million. It was $375 million they sold for, and it was for 12 times profit, which means their profit was $23 million a year. And almost all of that profit came from sponsorships. And so the way it works is that they would get groups of 10 or 20 people. They would host a talk. I think it was mostly an online talk that says like how Walmart is going to handle
remote work. Yeah.
Remote work. And 10 people, like I'm just going to guess, what's a Fortune 500? So like the CMO of I'm looking at it now, the Chief Information Officer of Northern Trust. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a huge company. The CIO of Delta, of Chevron, of Nestle is going to go, which is like, it's only 10 people at that talk, but it's 10 people who each control 20,000 people. And sponsors will pay stupid amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars to reach these people, enough that it makes $25 million a year in profit. Very interesting, an interesting community. Again, like Tiger 21, if you go to the website, it just kind of looks like pretty old school, mostly older white people. So who knows if it's hip or at least like in the know of everything. But where's this land with you? Interesting.
It's interesting, but I think, if I'm most people, I'm like, okay, the hard part of this is going and getting the CIO of Nestle or the CMO of Delta to join some group. How do you do that? And I remember, what's the name of the mastermind group that's the more popular company? Not Tiger 21, but like the other one we've both studied. I can't remember the name.
YPO, Young Presidential Organization?
No, the one that does like $100 million a year.
It's a competitor YPO?
Yeah. It's
Yeah. What's that? I don't remember what that's called. It starts with a C, I think.
It slips my name as well. It slips my brain as well. Anyways.
Vistage.
Yeah. Vistage. Sorry. Not starts with the, Vistage. So Vistage does the same thing as this. And I remember getting a phone call saying from some, pick up some random number. And it was, hey, Sean, this is Wendy from Vistage. Okay. Have we met? Yeah, actually, I've heard a lot about you. You're the CEO of Monkey Inferno, right? Yeah, that's right. Again, like, where do we meet? No. See, I'm actually the chapter president for San Francisco for Vistage, and I actually want to invite you to join our CEO network. We have CEOs from this company, this company, this company, and we just really think you'd be a great fit for our CEO group. We meet up about once a month in San Francisco. It's a great time. Blah blah blah. Okay, CEO group, you sound like you know me. You're talking about my city. This sounds pretty legit. Okay, so what are you asking me for? Yeah, so the membership is $20,000 a year. And and I was like, oh, okay, this is a sales call. Shit. Good job. You got 45 seconds into the sales call. And so this is how them, and I don't know if it was them exactly, but it was a company just like them, was recruiting people. They were just cold calling C-level people with a script that made you feel like they were calling for you based on your city and your company name and your role, your job title there. And so I think this is what you would have to do is you'd have to be a pretty badass cold caller and you'd have to figure out how to get this thing going with just enough brand names where this sounds legitimate.
I host an event called HustleCon. Over the years, I've probably had 150 speakers, tens of thousands of attendees. When I started it, I didn't know any of these people. I cold emailed them, and there's a way to play it off that it's cool to be part of. There's a way to get customers, I think, that's a little bit better than cold calling. And now I think cold calling and cold emailing like that should exist, and you should do that. I think there's a few different ways, like having a podcast, and there's a few interesting ways to do it. But nonetheless, I think it's an interesting community.